Board piers look simple. You drill a hole, you pour concrete, and it's done. But they are one of the easiest foundations to get wrong. So in this video, I'll show you when to use board piers, when not to, the main systems you will see on construction sites, and what you specify on your structural drawings. If you have no idea what a concrete board pier is, here's the simplest definition that I can give you. It's a concrete column that goes into the ground to transfer load into a better soil or into rock. So instead of relying on the top few 100 millimeters of dirt or bad soil, you're basically saying, let's skip this dodgy layer and found deeper where it's stronger and more stable. In the real world, that means a drilling rig comes in and makes the hole. Sometimes it's a proper big rig like this one. Sometimes it's a cute little bobcat with an auger. And this matters even if you're not the one on site drilling, because if you as the structural engineer design a pier that is, let's say 5-6 meters deep, and then the builder calls you saying that they can't drill that deep with what they've got on site, that is when you have to tell them that the cute little bobcat might not be the right tool for this specific job. Alright, before we talk about when to use board piers, let's talk about what you will actually see on structural drawings. On engineering plans, board piers are usually shown very simple. It's just a circle on a footing layout. So you've got a circle, circle, circle. All these circles represent one board pier. And then you've got a footing schedule with the board pier diameter and the board pier depth. And you might be told to refer to the detail sheets for reinforcement and construction notes. On projects with a bit more going on, the schedule can be way more detailed. So if we have a look at these drawings, you can see here we've got a bunch of different board piers. So you've got board pier 2, you've got board pier 3, board pier 6. And then if you go to the member schedule, you also have the length into the material. That could be soil, it could be rock. And you also have the reinforcement specifications. And sometimes it can be even more detailed. You can specify the embedment length into each layer of soil, the rock embedment. You can also specify the borehole reference according to the geotechnical report, and then you would also have the reinforcement. Here in Australia, you will commonly see 450 or 600 millimeters diameter piers on small residential projects. A very typical residential board pier cage detail is with 4 and 12, like this one, with a R8 helix 300 pitch. So this is the N12, goes here, you have 4, and then you have the helix R8. If you don't know what a helix is, it's a continuous spiral bar wrapped around the main vertical bar. So it looks like a spring. It's different from leagues because leagues are separate closed ties placed at intervals. So they're individual loops. They're not continuous, if that makes sense. For board piers, the helix are much more common, but nothing prevents you of using leagues like this. That would work too. Sometimes you won't even have leagues or helix. You will just have the 4 and 12 bars sticking out of the pier to tie it into a footing or a ground beam above. Other times you won't even have reinforcement at all. So don't freak out if you go on site or if you see drawings with piers without reinforcement. That said, we're talking small loads. If the pier is subject to uplift, lateral loads, or the pier is quite long, you should be specifying reinforcement. For larger projects, you would typically detail piers with at least the minimum reinforcement required by the code, which in Australia is 0.5% of the gross area of the pier. The minimum reinforcement required for a 450 millimeters diameter pier would be 4 and 16ths. A 600 millimeters diameter pier would be 5 and 20 or 8 and 16. A 750 millimeters diameter pier would be around 8 and 20. And you will also see 900 millimeters diameter piers, or even 1200, or even larger. Sometimes you have to run some quick numbers to find out what's the most cost-effective size of your pier, because the area of a pier is pi d squared divided by 4. So the concrete volume increases with d squared. That means that a 1200 millimeters diameter uses 4 times more volume of concrete per meter depth than a 600 millimeters diameter. Even though the diameter only doubles, the volume of concrete is 4 times more. So you need to do some maths, because sometimes it's better to use smaller diameter piers with a pile cap, but other times one larger pier is much simpler. So it depends on the loads, the stiffness, the soil, and some constructability aspects. Also, just to be clear, when I say small residential projects or commercial, I'm just grouping projects with typical characteristics, because the structure doesn't care what label the building has. It doesn't know if it's a commercial or if it's a residential or whatever it is. It only cares about loads, the stiffness, and the soil conditions. Some small domestic projects can still be very complex, so don't blindly assume that for domestic projects you're going to use 4 and 12, or for commercial projects you're going to use this type of reinforcement. You still have to run the numbers. And lastly, one more practical detailing note that I don't see many people doing it. If the cage goes full depth, it is helpful to specify spliced starter bars. So instead of showing your drawings the pier cage going all the way up like this, show a spliced starter bar. So you just come up like this and cogs into the footing, and the other starter bar go like this and cogs here. They'll probably do that anyway on site, but the reason being is that builders will buy these cages from stock length. So sometimes they buy 12 meters long cages, and on site they're just gonna cut them to length. If the longitudinal reinforcement is a 16 millimeters bar, yeah, that's fine. They could possibly just bend the board pier cage on site. That would be fine. But if the reinforcement is 20 mil or over 20 mil, 24, it's very hard to bend that reinforcement on site. So just make it easier for them and specify some starter bars. If you want a deeper dive on board piers, we actually just covered these on our first Bang Lab monthly group live call. So we're doing one topic every month, and the calls are recorded inside Bang Lab. So if you want the full in-depth version of this lesson with calculations for lateral and vertical loads, there's a link in the description below. All right, so let's talk about when you should use board piers. Most of the time, board piers are not just the default footing. They are a solution for a specific problem. Number one is to bypass weak soil near the surface. If the top layer of soil is fill, soft clay, uncontrolled material, or just rubbish soil, if you specify a shallow pad footing, you're basically sitting the structure on an old mattress. So the solution for that is to drill through it and found on better material. And we can use board piers for that. Number two is for settlement control. If the soil varies across the site, one side might settle more than the other, and that's when you get cracks, doors that don't close, you know, the usual drama. So piers can help you get onto a more consistent founding layer, which avoids differential settlement. Number three, high reactivity sites. On highly reactive clays, you often don't want the slab following the ground movement. So you use piers, and you might specify a void former to separate the slab from the soil and treat the slab more like a suspended system. Screw piers are a really good solution for this type too. And then we've got high lateral loads or uplift. Think of posts, towers, billboard signs, or some retaining walls. Pad footings can get ridiculous in size because it needs to resist the overturning forces. So if you use piers, you will use the depth into the soil to fight sliding, overturning, and uplift. In case it's just a single pier, what's going to happen here is that the column is going to have to bend, and then through this fixed connection to the base, the pier will also bend. So you will have to design this pier for bending so that it transfers the loads to the soil. If it is let's say a tower on 4 piers, you can often get a push-pull couple. So let's imagine we have a pile cap, and then your pier, and then you have whatever structure you have at the top. When the lateral load is applied to your structure, you're gonna have a compression in this pile, and then this other pile will try to uplift. So this is a really good use of board piers. However, don't forget that this load also causes a reaction force at the base. So this load is going to cause a bending moment, which causes the compression and tension, but that load will also have a reaction force at the base. And if the pile cap or ground beam or whatever you have connected to the piles can't take this horizontal reaction properly, you still end up with bending in the piers. So you still have to design these piers to bend. Sometimes you're not just chasing like a stronger soil, you're actually chasing rock, or maybe getting below a weaker layer of soil, because a global slip failure like landslide can take the whole foundation and the building together. So most of the times you will use piers to reduce this foundation movement risk. Ideally, you would socket the board piers into rock. If you do a lot of forensic structural engineering, you might come across a situation where the building is sinking. So one solution to stop the building sinking is to dig piers next to the existing footings with a reinforced concrete key that holds the existing footing. And piers are also a good solution when the nearby loads matter. So if you're close to boundaries, surfaces, or basements, retaining walls, pools, or existing footings, the piers can help you found deeper and reduce interaction with what's around. So basically, if you have surfaces or a pool or basement or whatever it is, if you had a pad footing and draw a 45 degrees line of influence, that footing will surcharge the structure. So what you do is you do a board pier instead of a pad footing, and then now you're not surcharging that structure anymore. Okay, when you should not use board piers. Board piers are great, but there are a few situations where they can be a pain or just the wrong tool. Number one, good founding is already close to the surface. If you've got competent natural ground at shallow depth, a pad footing or strip footing is often simpler, faster, and cheaper. So don't overcomplicate it. And then number two, high or seasonal groundwater near the founding depth. The problem in this situation is that as you drill, the hole is going to keep filling with water. So it's going to get messy. You do have some options, but not your traditional board pier. So it's better to avoid in this situation. And then number three, if you got sandy or collapsing ground, some soils just won't hold a hole open. So you drill and it collapses. So you drill again and it keeps collapsing. So that's when you start needing casing or different piling methods. Screw piers might be a better solution. Now we're going to talk about the 4 common systems that you will see on projects. This is important because board piers are rarely just a pier. They are part of a system, and the system changes how the loads flow. System number 1, it's a single pier with a column. So you've got one pier, one column. It's a fairly direct load path, but it's also where eccentricity and poor detailing can cause trouble. You might specify a pile cap to help with construction tolerances, but it's not a requirement that you have to specify a pile cap for a single pier, but in some situations it can help. Also, most of the times you will have a base plate with anchors. This detail with the steel column cast into the concrete is used more in small decks like carports or house raises. We do a lot of house raises in Queensland, Australia, but it's not really a typical detail outside of these cases. System 2 is the pier and beam system. So here the piers support a ground beam or a strip footing acting like a beam. So the beam has to span between piers, and then the piers distribute the loads to the soil. It's also a fairly common system in the construction industry. Number 3, we've got a pier slab, pretty much a flat plate supported on piers. This is where you have to think about things like punching shear at the piers and how the slab actually span between piers. If you turn this drawing upside down, it's the same as having a column landing on a suspended slab, if that makes it easier for you to visualize. And then system 4, which is pile groups with a pile cap. So instead of one pier, you've got multiple piers tied together by a cap. This is common for big loads and big overturning lateral loads, and the load is simply just shared better. Next week, I was thinking about making a video on the calculation for vertical and lateral loads on board piers. If that's something you'd like to see, just write in the comments board pier calculations and I'll make a video on that. All right, cheers.